In this video, I'm going to talk about how to know whether your therapist is sufficiently qualified and regulated by a professional body. This whole topic came about when I caught up with a friend recently. It was a friend who I haven't seen in a while, but someone I've known for many years. And a while ago, well over a year ago, this person said they were thinking about seeing a therapist. They asked me for some advice on it. I said I could recommend someone if they wanted, and they were kind of fine to sort of do a bit of a search around themselves, and they just managed to find someone. And hadn't seen this friend in a while, and when I was catching up with them, they said they'd found this therapist. The therapist had been great, and I was so happy that my friend had gone to therapy, and I'd known that he had struggled, and I was so proud of him for investing in the process. And we were just walking around the supermarket, and we were just catching up, and he was just telling me all about his therapy, and he told me that his therapist was £160, and I was thinking, oh, probably a psychologist if you're going to be paying that price range. He said his psychologist was, or his therapist was, on Harley Street, and I said, oh, don't worry about Harley Street, anyone can be on Harley Street, that doesn't mean anything. And he was like, oh, okay. And then he said how his therapist was flown around the world to like different places because he's a authoritative figure, and he's worked with sports people. And he's actually then said, oh, I kind of figured out one of the sports people that he had worked with. And I was like, oh, well, how did you find that out? And he said, what sport? And then it just became very obvious who he had actually worked with. And I was like, I'm not sure how I feel about that, because as a therapist, if you worked with a famous person, you cannot, or if you worked with anyone, you cannot give away any identifiable information that would lead someone to have a good idea as to who you're talking about. So I just said, oh, that's interesting. He perhaps wasn't as careful as he should have been in relation to confidentiality. And then we continued the conversation, and my friend kind of continued to say how this guy had helped him. And then I was just curious. I was like, this sounds like a great therapist. Like, he's perhaps, has got a very good reputation. And I was interested to know, like, was it a psychologist or was it a psychotherapist? And I was just genuinely interested in the qualifications. And then he said the name of the therapist, and we Googled him, and there was nothing available online. No LinkedIn profile. There was like a vague mention of him somewhere online, but it literally just said BSc Psych, which means Psych undergrad, which does not make you a psychologist. It said postgraduate diploma, but in nothing, like as in it just said PG Dip, and it didn't say what the PG Dip was in. A postgraduate diploma could have been in like business, or it could have been in something random for all we know. And then it said like C Psych. I didn't even know what those letters meant, because I only know what D Psych means, which means you've done your doctorate, but it wasn't D Psych, it was like C Psych. And I just Googled C Psych because I didn't know what it meant, and I was like, oh, that just means they're like, have studied psychology, or something like this. And no mention of regulating bodies, nothing else. But you could see how a member of the public would see that all these letters after his name, because he had 3 separate letters after his name, that looks like someone who studied a lot. And I said to my friend, I was like, I feel bad kind of saying this, but I'm not seeing him on LinkedIn. I'm not seeing any regulating bodies. I mean, this guy has obviously chosen not to promote himself very much online, which is fine. Some therapists want their privacy and don't want to be online very much. I respect anyone who lives their life like this and admire them as well. And I, it was kind of like, okay, maybe he just doesn't need to promote himself in that way. Maybe, he's getting his clients more like word of mouth. But I was like, I'm starting to feel a bit funny about this person, because if you're a real therapist, you are 100%, if you've done all your qualifications, you 100% have got one, and you're in the UK, you are going to have a regulating body. Because if you don't have a regulating body, then who do your clients complain to if they actually feel that you've been negligent, or that you've participated in some form of misconduct, or that your client just feels that you've gone against your ethical code in some way. We need to be reported if we have done something wrong. That's how the industry works. Also, if you've worked really hard and you've studied and got your qualification, you absolutely want to be credible by being linked to a regulating body. Again, that's how our industry works. We're all regulated if we're fully qualified. If someone's still in training and they're working towards accreditation, they should just say that. They should be very clear about they're in training, they're working towards this accreditation, and they should say which accreditation they're working towards, because they should have some sort of subscription, like a student subscription to that regulating body. Again, because if someone wants to complain about a therapist who's in training, that therapist should be following the ethical codes of a particular regulating body. And even if no one wants to complain, as therapists, we should know our ethical code and know what's ethical and what's not ethical. And the only way of knowing this is subscribing to a code of ethics. We need to know we need to make a decision about who our code of ethics are. Now, there's only a few main regulating bodies in the UK. So there's HCPC, which is the one for psychologists. There's BABCP, which is the one for CBT therapists, and then often confused with another one, which is BACP. So BABCP for CBT therapists, BACP, which is one of the psychotherapist regulating bodies, and then you also have UKCP, which is another one for psychotherapists. So essentially, three main regulating bodies for psychotherapists, one of which regulates fully qualified CBT therapists. And then you've got the one for psychologists. My professional bodies, I have two. I've got the one for psychologists and I've got the one for CBT therapists. And you can search me on those. There's a place on those websites for members of the public to search their therapist, to make sure that their therapist is linked to those professional bodies, is accredited or is registered with those professional bodies. If a client wants to complain about me, if they think I've done anything unethical, they are more than entitled to contact those professional bodies, and then I would be investigated. My professional body would contact me. They would do a whole investigation process. I would have to defend whatever I'm accused of, and the client has a lot of, they have the reassurance that they are kept safe from any abuse of power or misconduct. And I know that I have to, play by the rules. I have to know all my code and I have to do things right. There's not only just in the therapy room, but also in life. Like, for example, there are most crimes you cannot commit. If you are a psychologist, you are at risk of being struck off if you get involved in criminal activity. So it means we have our moral code is extremely high. We have to live our lives in a certain way. We have to conduct our lives in a certain way. And we have to, take a lot of responsibility to be there for our clients. And, the code of ethics is something that's amazing, because it means that, not only do we just do what regular people do, we actually go above and beyond to follow this code, to make sure we're living our lives in a way that we are not breaking any rules, we're not involved in any crimes, we're good people who are living our lives in a good way, and we're in a good position. People can put us in a position of trust and they can confide in us. And if there's any confusion about boundaries or anything like that, and we just don't know what's right or wrong, like, for example, receiving gifts. We are not allowed to receive gifts of a large value from our clients. We're not allowed to date our clients. Like, if anyone ever gets confused about that, we can just refer to our code, get the answer, and if we're still confused, we can call our ethical body and say, I've got an ethical dilemma. What should I do here? Some ethical dilemmas are less clear as to what we should do. Sometimes we receive information in our job in a confidential way, and we don't know whether we need to break confidentiality, and that's where sometimes we can contact or sometimes we may choose to contact our professional body and just get some advice from them. That's part of the subscription. We pay a fee every year to get that service of helping. They help guide us. So the problem when someone calls themselves a therapist, so maybe they've done like an undergrad in psychology, which by no means makes someone a qualified therapist. Maybe they've done some short psychotherapy courses, but again, by no means makes them a qualified therapist. You have to, in the UK, you have to have a regulating body to make your to be able to call yourself a therapist. But that's not, it's not a legally protected title, and this is where the problem lies. Terms such as counselling psychologist, which is my profession, is a legally protected title, as is clinical psychologist, also legally protected title. You are breaking the law if you use those titles when you actually have not earned them. Now, the problem is with psychotherapist and counsellor, anyone can call themselves those terms and they're not breaking the law. However, that doesn't mean it's okay to do it. It's actually not okay to not be clear and transparent with people. And this is where a huge problem lies. So I've worked really hard for my qualification. I studied for 8.5 years to get a qualification as a psychologist, to be a fully qualified psychologist, and then I studied an extra 1.5 years to also be a CBT therapist. And I've worked really hard for those qualifications, and I am regulated, so I have a code of ethics that I have to respect and have to abide by, otherwise I will be in trouble. The problem with someone just calling themselves a therapist when they haven't worked hard for their qualifications and they haven't reached the level of having a professional body is that they can call themselves, they can call themselves a therapist, psychotherapist, whatever, and even if they just call themselves a psychologist, that's not legally protected. So anyone can call themselves a psychologist, anyone can charge £160, anyone can work on Harley Street. You just hire a room by the hour and do it that way. And the problem with all of this is if someone is charging high fees, there's often an assumption from the public that, oh, they must be qualified. They're calling themselves a therapist, they're charging high fees, they're on Harley Street, they must be qualified. And this was the assumption of my friend who was seeing this therapist, who he said this therapist really helped him. He genuinely feels, that he's received really good support from this therapist. He really has received good help. So the problem with someone putting themselves in this position is that, they really haven't proven themselves in terms of getting the qualifications to do so. And they haven't worked as hard as the rest of us. And also they're not accountable. They don't have a regulating body if anyone does want to complain. So I was very upset by the fact that I found this person probably has not jumped through all the hoops that they should to be able to put themselves in this position and charge themselves these fees to see clients, may not be as qualified as they need to be able to do some real good. And also it does lead me to kind of question what kind of person has the audacity to do that in the first place. It's a bold move for someone to just randomly call themselves, to not train as a therapist, because we just don't know what training courses this person has or has not done. So it's a very bold move for someone to put themselves in this position and charge such high fees. So I felt really bad saying to my friend, look, I don't know if this person is qualified or not. And I have to tell you, because we've searched him online, and we only searched him online out of curiosity, only to realize that, oh, this person actually is, I'm very dubious about them. So I felt really bad, and my friend had a lot of questions about this, because he was like, but I actually really feel they helped me. Like, where do I stand now? Like, on one hand, they've really helped me, but on the other hand, I kind of feel a little bit duped. So anyway, at this point, we just didn't know if the person was qualified or not. So my friend sent a message to the therapist, which I'm going to read. I'm not going to disclose the name of the therapist, by the way. So my friend says, hi, just speaking to a friend of mine about you, and the friend would potentially like therapy. and they've asked what your correct title is and what your professional body is. Let me know. And then the reply from this person was, "Hi, I'm not taking on any new clients currently until the new year, most likely. But thanks for thinking of me. I'd recommend my approach though, i.e. CBT, Cognitive Behavioural Therapy. There's no governing body for therapy in the UK. That is absolutely not true. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But ones that have proclaimed themselves include BACP, which I used to subscribe to for years. I'll talk about that point in a moment. And I also recommend your friends select someone with years of experience more than anything. Although an independent now, I maintain my association membership with RSM, Royal Society of Medicine, but that's not necessary. I hope you're well." Okay, so that reply actually looks like a very credible reply, and for a member of the public to think, you know, this person's mentioning kind of professional bodies in the reply. You know, they've even said that they have one with Royal Society of Medicine. So this person, it's so clever how they've replied. So I'll just take you through their reply, and I'll tell you what it all means to me, because I know that a member of the public would actually go, "Oh, right, they've answered my question, and oh yeah, they've clearly got lots of like credibility behind them." So I'm not taking on any new clients until the new year, most likely. So this person knows that the potential referral is very interested in vetting them and making sure that they're properly qualified. So straight away, this person doesn't want to be investigated further, and therefore they decline the offer of a referral. They know we're going to do some research on how qualified they are if we're going to go to them as a client. So I'm very suspicious of that part. I recommend my approach though, CBT. Now, a lot of people say they're doing CBT. Are they doing gold standard, good quality CBT? Absolutely not, because CBT, to train in CBT and get the BABCP accreditation, that was harder than doing my doctorate. So that was a 1.5 year course, and it was so difficult. I mean, it was amazing. I learned more on that course than I learned on my doctorate. But that is a tough qualification. And if your CBT therapist does not have that qualification, then they're either working towards it, which is great. If they say they're working towards it, brilliant. That's great. If they if they have some sort of membership to that body, great. They're aware of it. They want to work towards it. They're trying their best to get to that gold standard. If someone doesn't have BABCP and doesn't really have any intentions to work towards it, they're not doing proper CBT and they haven't been trained properly if they're in the UK. So then the next part they say is there's no official governing body for therapy in the UK. That is absolutely incorrect. There's 4 main governing bodies, which I mentioned earlier in this video, and you really want to be subscribed to one of them, with the only exception of if you're a psychoanalysis, and there's not that many analysts out there, but for psychoanalysts, they have different governing bodies. So they're an exception. They work in a very different way. It's more Freudian how they work. There's not a lot of them around, but they do have their own regulating bodies. But pretty much just for main regulating body for therapists in the UK, you want to be subscribed to at least one of them. Okay, so then he goes on to say, but one that have proclaimed themselves include BABCP, which I used to subscribe to for years. I do not believe for a second that this person ever had the BABCP accreditation, because it is hard to get that accreditation. You kill yourself trying to do it. The amount of paperwork that actually goes into you just getting the provisional level of accreditation from them before you get your full accreditation is tremendously difficult. Once you get that accreditation, you do not want to lose it. So if he has had this accreditation and he's lost it, then I would say, well, why has he lost it? Why would you work so hard for something and lose it? Either you've been struck off, or else you never achieved it in the first place. You just wouldn't lose it, especially if you're still seeing clients. You need to keep subscribing to that accreditation. Otherwise, you're not accredited. And if you're not accredited, you're an unregulated therapist, which raises alarm bells for me. And then he goes on to mention Royal Society of Medicine. I mean, you're not a doctor. this person's definitely not a doctor, because it didn't say anything about medicine in his titles, because he studies psychology. If someone studies psychology, they have not gone down the medical route. So this man is not a doctor. And why would you subscribe to the Royal Society of Medicine? I mean, I'm pretty sure, I haven't looked into this, but I'm pretty sure anyone can just subscribe and say, oh yeah, I'm interested, and take this very basic level of like a lot of regulating bodies have this kind of if you're interested in our body, you can subscribe as this kind of member who's not like an accredited or registered member, more of a interested person who kind of wants to receive our information, newsletter, what courses we're doing, what workshops we're doing, that kind of thing. But there's so my assumption, and I haven't researched this, but I'm pretty certain that this would be the case, that anyone can just sign up to this kind of subscription, pay money to Royal Society of Medicine, and get these kind of get some basic kind of benefits of paying a yearly subscription. I very much doubt that this person has subscribed in any type of way that would make him any type of medical professional, because his letters after his name were nothing to do with medicine. So that is my opinion on this person, and it infuriates me because he has charged my friend £160. My friend has gone to him for many, many months and confided in him, and he just hasn't worked hard enough to get the qualifications that he should have to put himself in that position and charge those fees. So my friend said to me, well, like, I don't know how to feel now, because he really did help me, but yet he's like done this dodgy thing. And I've just said to my friend, like, I think you have to see some people as not black and white, like not, all good or all bad. But it's a very questionable thing that he's done, putting himself in a position and essentially misleading people in order to get clients. And I said, on the other hand, he might have given some very good advice and helped you and helped guide you in the right direction. And that is something you can be grateful for and thankful for. But at the same time, remembering that he is someone who has really put himself, again, kind of said, how I said is like, had the audacity to put himself in a position that he shouldn't really be in. And while it's not a criminal offense, it's just not fair on the public, because it is so confusing to know what's what in relation to mental health practitioners. We've got psychiatrists, we've got psychologists, we've got psychotherapists, we've got counselors, we've got psychological well-being practitioners. Like, there is so many mental health professions out there. How do we keep on top of who the regulating bodies are? How do we know who's accredited, especially if people are going to kind of allude to the accreditations in their communication and write lots of letters after their name, which are probably legit letters that he's achieved, but they're just not the courses that would lead someone to be a psychotherapist. So my advice for the public is do your research, and if in doubt, ask questions. I will always answer people's questions if they're curious about any particular therapist, if they want to, ask me what I think about someone who's got these qualifications or this or these regulating bodies. Happy to give an opinion. Feel free to comment below if you've got questions, and I can give advice on this. But definitely get your head around the kind of, if you're thinking of seeking therapy, get your head around the main regulating bodies and what that means and what people need to do to try to get those accreditations, because the good accreditations take many, many years to achieve, and you need a lot of client hours behind you to get to that level, and a lot of really good quality training that leads to getting you there. And for people who are in the helping profession, do the hard work that's required to get accredited, and then you won't be in a position where people feel that they have to question your qualifications. I think one of the problems in Britain, we don't ask questions. In my time being a psychologist, and I qualified, I finished my doctorate about 11 years ago, not one person has ever asked me to prove that I really am a psychologist, like by showing certificates or anything like that. And that's, you know, it's incredibly polite that no one has ever asked me to prove that I am really qualified, but it's also very concerning that that many people would have trusted that I am a real psychologist when they've never really challenged it. And that leads me to my final point of saying, don't be afraid to ask your therapist what qualifications they have, who their regulating body is. In America, people are far more brave to ask these questions, and they feel far more comfortable to ask, you know, people about who they're, you know, in the States they say licensed, who they're licensed with. Here, we just don't do it enough. So ask more questions. Don't feel it's rude. If someone is really qualified, they'll be so proud to tell you what their qualifications are, how hard it was to achieve them, and what regulating their bodies they're actually with. If you find yourself in a position where you have been seeing an unregulated therapist and then it comes to light and you discover that this is the case, it's actually a very difficult situation you're in, because without a regulating body, you have no one to make a complaint to. Because if you contact, for example, the HCPC, which is the one that regulates psychologists, they will just say, oh, this person's not on our register. They're not regulated with us, so we can't handle this complaint. And then if you contact BABCP, the one for the CBT therapist, they will say exactly the same thing. So the only thing you really can do is, perhaps if this person has a website, you could leave a Google review saying what your experience is and pointing out the facts of the matter, which is that the person has no regulating body, and therefore that you have concerns that they're positioning themselves as a therapist without being properly regulated. However, the therapists that we've encountered to be doing this, the therapist I've been mentioning in this video has no website, so there would be no opportunity to really leave a review like this, which means that people are kind of left in a very vulnerable position if they've fallen victim to someone who's presented themselves as a therapist and that they're not actually properly qualified or regulated. And that means that people end up walking away from this situation feeling really confused about what's happened, and a mixture of emotions. Angry, you know, that the therapist hadn't been completely honest, and upset, but at the same time feeling I was really helped by this person. You can say that you're not happy. You know, you can say, I feel really upset that you didn't inform me that you don't have a regulating body. I know that all therapists in the UK absolutely need to have a regulating body. Otherwise, there's no one for me to complain to if I'm not happy with the service. And it's okay to communicate this to the therapist if you feel brave enough to do so. Of course, a lot of people are not going to feel brave enough to do so because they don't want to have these difficult conversations with their therapist, even if it's just by sending an email. But of course, if you are not happy and you have found yourself in this situation, you can, you know, so you can send an email if you want to just get it off your chest, say that you're just not happy with what's happened. And you can, you know, share your story online. I think the beauty of social media these days is that we can actually, you know, or the beauty of the internet these days is we can report companies that we're not happy with. And if you are positioning yourself selling a service, anyone can write a review or anyone can comment online about the poor service they've received, and you as a service seller have to accept those comments. So it's perfectly fine to decide to write something online about a therapist that you're not happy about. It's perfectly fine to name them and to write the factual information of what happened and to tell your side of the story. That's one outlet that people can go down, and that can protect people. Because if this has happened and someone has, even if the therapist has very much tried to stay offline so that people don't have the information to hand and can't do their research, then at least if people Google the therapist's name in the future, at least other people will be warned that someone is perhaps kind of practicing in a fraudulent way. It's unfortunate that you don't have a leg to stand on legally when this happens. It is a civil matter. You could sue the therapist and you could try to get all of your money back, and you definitely would have fair shot, at taking this down the small claim route, just if you wanted to try and get your fees back that you've paid. Whether this goes in your favor or whether it goes in the favor of the person who's positioned themselves as a therapist would really depend on the contract that you have with them. But I'm not here to give legal advice. I'm just here to try to help you know about how to spot if a therapist might be a bit of a fake. If you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. And if you want me to make any more videos about particular topics, please comment in the description below.